The gods would kept its own counsel. Snow lay thin upon the mosses, and the black mirror of the pool held a skin of ice so sheer that it seemed a breath might break it. The face in the weirwood watched him as it had watched his father before him, the eyes red as wounds that would not close. Ghost moved without a sound, a pale shade among the trunks, and laid his head against Jon's hip so he could feel the warmth through wool and leather. "I am sending you away," Ned Stark said. He had come so quietly Jon had not heard him. The Lord of Winterfell did not wear a lord's face in the godswood. The wind threaded gray through his dark hair, and his voice was hoarse as if the words had scraped him raw. Jon knew those words from his dreams and from the long glances Catelyn gave him across the high table and the way Robb's laughter shrank whenever she entered the hall. He had expected the wall and Benjen's black cloak, old stones, old vows. "To the wall," he began, and felt the shape of his future like a road already underfoot. Ned Stark's mouth made a line. "No, the wall is... It is a vow you should only make in the freedom of your own choosing. Robert will be here within days. I must go south with him, and I would not leave you here to grow hard under my lady's eye, nor send you into vows you may regret. I was a boy in the Vale. It is no cruel place. I have written to Lord Yon Royce. He will take you as his squire for a time, until matters are settled." The name lay cool upon Jon's tongue. Runestone, Bronze Yon, of old blood and older pride, whose son Waymar had ridden to the wall and never returned. "The Eyrie," Jon said softly, tasting the wind and the stones he'd never seen, the mountain air. "You were fostered there." Ned's eyes went to the pool. "I was a ward in the Eyrie when your grandsire and Robert rose against the Mad King. The Vale is high and clean. It breeds men who stand when the winds are worst. Yon Royce is such a man. He will work you hard. It will be good for you." "What of Lady Lisa?" Jon asked carefully. He had heard things, the way boys do, half-words and servants' mutters. Lisa Tully had left King's Landing after her husband's death with her babe in arms and closed the Vale behind her. "Will she have me?" "She will not refuse me," Ned Stark said, though he did not sound certain and would never say that he was not. "Nestor Royce holds the gates of the moon for her. You will be presented first at the Eyrie and then placed with Lord Yon at Runestone. When winter is less cruel, perhaps you will ride the Grey Road and hunt the mountain valleys. You would like that." Ghost's breath misted white. "And Robb?" Jon asked, though he knew that answer too. Robb would be heir and lord and brother, and the distance between two boys could be measured in mountains. "Robb will sit Winterfell, with Maester Luwin and Ser Roderick to guide him until he does not need their hands. Bran will learn what he must. Arya..." Ned's mouth twitched. "Arya will never learn what she must, but we will try. Sansa will go south with me. Your sisters are better together." His look softened and was proud and grieved at once. "You are of my blood, Jon. What I do to keep you safe." Safe, Jon thought. The weirwood was older than safety. His gaze knew things men did not. "Is it for me?" Jon said before he could stop himself. "Or for my mother's name?" There was a winter silence, white and empty. Ned Stark stared at the face in the tree as if it might answer for him. His gloved hand touched Jon's shoulder once. "For you," he said. "That must suffice." Jon bowed without quite meaning to and felt his spine stiffen under the weight of the word. "I will not shame you," he said, because that was what squire boys said with awkward hands and bright eyes. He had seen so many promises made in Winterfell's yard, flung like spears into the sky. Some fell true. Ned's arm drew him close briefly, the embrace of a man who had learned to make his tenderness quiet. "I know," he said. They parted among the red leaves. Later, Arya wept angry tears and clung to him in the empty passage outside the armory, her wrists smelling of horse and practice. "You can't go where I can't go," she said, as if that had been a law written before walls. "Take me with you. I can climb mountains better than any mule." "You can," Jon admitted, and made her laugh even as she scrubbed at her eyes with a sleeve. Ghost nuzzled her hand. "But father would set the whole Vale upon its head, hunting a little girl with a wooden sword. Look after Needle." "She's mine?" Arya hissed in satisfaction. The sound a small wolf makes when it tears meat from the bone. She drew closer, fierce and small. It isn't fair. It rarely is, Jon said, trying on Tyrion Lannister's words from the yard a fortnight past and finding they fit better than he liked. Wear it like armor, the dwarf had told him of his bastard name. Then it can never be used to hurt you. He would have said as much to Arya, but steel lessons were easier than truths. Robb had a lord's hugs and a boy's grin. Bran's eyes were wide as if Jon were walking into a tale he could not follow. And Rickon would not be coaxed to bear his goodbye with any dignity. Catelyn stood behind them, far as winter stars. She did not speak. Ghost's low whiteness at Jon's heel was the only answer he wanted. They left at dawn, when the pale banners of frost still lay upon the roofs of the little houses of the winter town and men stumped toward smoke, rubbing hands, swearing mild swears at the cold. Maester Luwin had set the travels, careful, with coin and seals and a letter for Nestor Royce, a second for Lord Yone, and a third for Lisa that Jon was not permitted to carry. They rode east to White Harbor by slow stages. The world thinned as the miles passed. He had known Winterfell's forests and river flats and the way the land gathered itself into the Barrowlands, low and ancient. But White Harbor lifted white and fine from the river mouth, spires pricking the gray. Lord Wyman Manderley received them bulging and courteous, and tables groaned under eels and butter and a pie with a merman flopping in dough. Jon tried not to stare. The port smelled of salt and fish and far things. He slept to the creak and sigh of a Manderley cog's belly and woke to the long breathing of the sea. Gulltown's harbor had more masts than a wood had trunks. It seemed, their pennons flat in the wind. The vale rose beyond, a pale wall, sheer as the side of a chalice. The mountains were clouds like torn veils. Ghost disliked the ship and disliked the town, his nostrils wrinkling at tar and oil and people, but he liked the heights. Jon discovered that on the third day, when a girl with strong legs and quick hands laughed at his northern cloak and led their mule train up paths that were not paths at all, only sheets of rock where the mules found grips no eyes could see. "Maya Stone," she said, offering him a hand when a heel slid loose. Her eyes were as blue as Vale sky and a lock of hair had stuck to her forehead with sweat. "You'll want to trust the mules, Snowboy. They're surer than you, and surer than any knight." "Jon," he said, catching the hand. Her palm was hard and warm. She looked at Ghost, who looked at her and decided she was neither prey nor threat. "Bastard," Maya asked without meanness, as one might ask, "Shoemaker." He nodded. She nodded back, simple as breathing. "Well, the mules don't care. This is Redfoot. She's a better climber than any lord I've met." They slept that night at the First Way Castle, a stone nest clinging to the cliff with a view down into forever. Jon stood on the parapet and let the wind comb his hair back and felt the mountain lay its clean cold upon him. Ghost lied down with his muzzle over Jon's boot. Far below, Gulltown was a spill of lights around ink-black water. Here, the world was narrower, stone and sky and the thin path between, but he felt larger in it. They reached the gates of the moon at sundown hours later, a proper castle broad at the mountain's foot. Nestor Royce wore his bronze with more pomp than steel, his circlet patterned in ancient runes that made whispers stir in Jon's northern blood. Nestor's smile was wide and pleased to be needed. "Ned Stark's boy," he said, after reading the seals and weighing Jon's face with his eyes. "You have your father in the set of your mouth. The Eyrie has missed him. We ride up in the morning. You will find the Lady Lisa particular." Jon found her chilled and changeable as Vale wind, eyes washed pale by tears that might have been yesterday's or last year's. The Eyrie itself was a hall built for sky. Its pale stone drank light and gave back brightness and blue. Jon's hand could have brushed both walls of the small hall if he'd stretched. Its floor was so clean he could see the pale lines of the tiles through his own reflection. He had never felt so close to the empty places of the world. Ghost disliked the sky cells and the moon door, and so did Jon. He kept to the long galleries where the light fell and the tapestries of Arryn falcons rode their eternal winds. Maester Coleman looked him over, took his measure gently, and complained that the boy brought a wolf into his sickroom as if Ghost were a draft. Lord Yon is at Runestone, the maester told him. He will bring a hawk to the mountain in a fortnight. It must be a hawk, for he has no patience for ravens. Lisa gave John a thin look the day he was led into her presence. Ned Stark's bastard, she said, as if the words were salt on the tongue. I will be obeyed here. You will be courteous. The child must not be upset. Robert Arryn, the child, blinked at John from a seat of pillows, chewing 2 fingers, the third tucked into his sleeve. Is it true you have a wolf? He asked, as if this were the most important thing to be known about northern boys. Mother does not like wolves. She says they frighten the mules, but I should like to look at him. He would mind me, do you think? He minds few, John said and crouched lower. But he will not harm you. Ghost regarded the boy and yawned, delicate and pink as a kitten. Robert giggled until his cough racked him red. When Yon Royce came, he filled a doorway and a room, and then the Eyrie itself seemed barely big enough. He looked John over like a swordsmith eyeing a blade begun by someone else. He has the look of Stark, Bronze Yon said. Your father cut you true. Can you seat a lance? Run? Climb? I can climb, John said, thinking of Maya and her mules and the place where the path had become a ribbon on rock. I can ride. I have trained with the Master-at-Arms at Winterfell. We will teach you to train with men, Yon said and laughed. It was a laugh for yards and lists. He took John down from sky to sea to Runestone, and the air changed on his skin and in his blood again. The Royce halls were heavy with memories cut into bronze and stone. Men there wore rings of old copper and spears with patterns hammered through the heads, and they shod their children in leather stitched with runes whose meanings their grandfathers had forgotten. John slept to the sea's thunder in that place and woke to drills. He learned the Vale's spear, lighter than Winterfell's, carried on a shorter haft. He learned to put his shield precisely to turn the cut from a Corbray longsword, how to fight on sharp slopes that punished the stance of a Flatlander. He broke 3 spears and 4 fingernails and raised a bruise the color of dusk across Andar Royce's ribs. Andar was broad as a gate and as patient, and his smile when John landed the blunt point was almost a new season's beginning. You have quick eyes, Andar said. The mountain likes you. The mountain likes itself, John answered, dry as he dared. Bronze Yon heard and roared approval. Ghost wandered Runestone at will. The kennel master learned quickly not to chase him out with sticks, and the hounds learned it in another way. At dusk, John would sit on the seaward wall with the wolf's head in his lap and listen to Rabar Royce play at the harp he had taken with him to Renly's green camp before the world went red and odd. In those days Rabar was still the Lord's second son who liked songs and girls' scarves and the easy rhythms of a good wine. The world went odd soon enough. The day Catelyn Stark led a dwarf in out of the mountain wind and the word Lannister ran along the Eyrie stones like cold, John was there, called up with Bronze Yon for courtesy and curiosity. Maya Stone had come with them, lean and sure, a little chalky from the climb. Mord the jailer spat and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and grinned, showing the brown ruin of his teeth. The dwarf stared at the sky swaying above and made a sour face at its height and said something that made Bronn laugh. Not a proper laugh, but a chuckle like a knife sliding back into its sheath. Catelyn saw John as she saw a column in a hall she had always known was there. Her mouth flattened the way Ned's did when he swallowed against blood on his tongue. John, she said coolly, and because the Eyrie teaches men to hear the thyness sound, John heard the strain under the cool. My lady, he met her eyes as a man must. He could see the journey in them, the scraped hands, the fear kept wrapped in duty's cloths. He had hated her and loved her and been a boy beneath her for so long that standing straight today seemed a kind of treachery. He did it anyway. Ghost stood at his shoulder and stared at the dwarf. Tyrion Lannister's eyes were quick and bright as a fox's in frost. He saw the wolf first and then, slowly, John. Recognition dawned and warmed him for a breath. We meet again, Lord Snow, he said, with a little bow that had court in it even upon the bare stones of the Sky Cell's corridor. I had not expected the Eyrie to give me such familiar comforts. A wolf, a Stark, and a precipice. I am home. You have a strange notion of comfort, Jon said, because he could not say more. Tyrion's words in Winterfell had stayed with him almost as cleanly as the words his father spoke in the Godswood. Wear it like armor. Jon had learned to do that. He wondered what Tyrion wore. Wit as steel, likely. Wine where a weak man might have put prayer. Lysa Arryn's justice was a pale thing with a loud voice. She sat with her boy in her lap, and her eyes reddened and her lip quivered like a girl's. She wanted Tyrion to fly, and she wanted everyone to see her righteously wanting it. Ser Vardy's Aegon offered his grey strength like a gift, honorable as an old sword hilt. Bronn took off armor piece by piece like a man undressing for fun. Jon wanted to look away. He did not. The Eyrie made men look down. He looked and watched Bronn turn a fight into hunger and patience, circling, letting the older man spend himself, letting the slope and the slick stones fight for him. Vardy's Aegon's breath became a bellows groan. He tried to stand in one place as if a floor might rise to hold him steady. It did not. Bronn cut him down finally when he was already falling, and the blood that followed wrote a line down the stones like a rune none of them would forget. The Vale Knights hissed. Around Jon, bronze and steel stiffened and slid and whisper sang. He felt the wish to lift a spear and bury it in Bronn's back. He did not move. Law had been done, and law had teeth. Tyrion Lannister walked out alive upon those teeth. He passed Jon and let his glance catch. It was not triumph in the dwarf's eyes, nor even relief, but a worn sort of knowing. "Remember your armor," he said, low and quick, and was gone in a flock of mountain men who smelled of smoke and stone and had names like knives. Stone crows, moon brothers, burned men, black ears. They took the high road that afternoon, grinning their broken grins, a rumor before they were a dust cloud. That night, Bronze Yohn sat by the fire in the small hall, the light writing long lines across his ringmail. "You wanted him dead," he said to Lysa later, and Jon stood with the other men and said nothing. "You had your law and it spared him. You will not ask us to be ashamed of it." Lysa's mouth trembled. "He killed my lord husband, did he?" Yohn asked softly. "Then he is a subtler man than we know." Jon did not sleep well. He went to the yard with the gray dawn and found Maya Stone already there, binding a scrape on her palm with a strip of cloth torn from a shirt. Ghost's nose told him first that the wind would shift by noon. The mules in their narrow stable stamped and snorted, complaining about whatever mules complain about. Maya watched him watch them and smiled crookedly. "You don't much fancy watching other men fight, do you?" "I prefer to know who is struck and why," Jon said. "That would sour half the songs," Maya said. "But it might sweeten the world." News came quickly to the mountains. Ravens beat their wings through the passes like arrows, and sometimes they were meat for hawks and sometimes they carried words safely. Some words came without feathers, running over the gray road with thin boys and breathless men. Jon learned to read their faces the way Bronze Yohn did. There is a way men have when the tidings are black, the eyes fixed on some far point, the mouth not quite trusting speech. It was that way when a raven came from King's Landing with an ugly seal broken and ugly words within. "Lord Ned Stark is taken. Treason." He wrote Cersei, he wrote of the bastards. The world pitched and the Vale wind finished the motion, stealing Jon's breath for him. The letter said Cersei's golden children and made treason fit for him like a glove. Bronze Yohn cursed and then stood terribly quiet. "We ride no colors at Lady Lysa's command," he said at last, to the heir, to honor, to the swollen pride that sat high in the Eyrie with a sickly boy in her lap. "But I'll be thrice damned if I drink with Lannister friends." Jon tasted copper. He was no stranger to anger. A bastard learns anger young, and he learns to give it a place to sleep in his bones. This anger would not lie down. It snarled, and it wanted blood, and it wanted his father's hand on his shoulder, and could not have it. He went to the one place that was like a god's wood he did not possess. The mountain itself kept its own counsel. He climbed behind Runestone, leaving the path where it left him, finding grips where his hands found them. His breath loud, ghosting along below and then above and then below again as if the pale beast knew a path in the sheer. He sat where the cliff bit out, his legs over nothing, and looked east. The sky was a hard, clean blue that meant weather was brewing, coming or going. It was never clear. The sea was a plate with knife gleams. He felt small, the way he had at Winterfell's heart tree, but not helpless. If he could only see far enough, perhaps he could will the world right. Ghost pressed his flank to Jon's, a firm living line. The raven that spoke his father's death came 2 weeks later, when the wind had already scraped Jon raw. The paper smelled of damp and ash, and the letters seemed to have been trailed by a hand that did not want to be writing. The Kingslayer's sister had not cut Ned Stark's head with her own hands, but Jon could see hers in the neatness of the words. Confess, mercy, traitor, traitor. He did not even know what his father had confessed, only that in the morning light, the man who had spoken to him in the God's Wood had been a head upon a spike, and the songs of King's Landing had been loud enough to drown his sister's screams. He did not remember walking to Bronze Yon's Solar, only the feel of the green wool of the door hanging under his fingers when he reached for it. Yon had a map spread upon the table and a cup of something black and bitter going. Cold. Andar was there, too, and Rabar's harp lay on the chair as if someone had thought of playing it and then remembered the world. "My lord," Jon said, and his voice sounded like he had been eating sand. Yon looked up. This was a man who had buried a son and had not fallen apart at the hinge of it. He was an honorable man, he said, and Jon realized Yon already knew that the ravens had 2 wings. "I am going north," Jon said, the words stumbling out of him, naked and almost ashamed. "I will go by the high road if I have to. I will go through the bloody gate with a poor man's rags if that is what it takes." "You will do no such thing," Yon said, not unkindly. He reached across the table and put a finger upon the riverlands, upon the tangle of blue and black lines that made up his mother's brother's lands. "There is a war that belongs to your brother now. If you get yourself killed on a goat trail, you will have done honor no good, and you will have done Rob no good either. Men will ride north when Lady Lisa lets them. We press her. Until then, you will do what you have come here to do. You will learn to fight like a Vale man, and when the day comes, you will be a spear upon our wing." Yon Royce did not often say please to anyone. He said it then, though silently, something in his jaw, something in the way his big hand settled upon the map as if it held too much in place. Jon swallowed, taste of salt. He bowed his head. "I will be ready," he said, and felt how thin and boyish it sounded, and hated and loved himself for it. He trained. It was the only thing in his power. He lifted the shield until his arm shook and then lifted it longer. He ran the switchback path behind Runestone until Ghost's tongue hung and his own breath turned raw in his throat. He learned the name of the wind when it came from the west with that low, sustained moan, the one that meant a storm at sea and trouble for boats bound for Gulltown. He learned how the mountain clans bled the high road, little bites taken out of caravans until the lords of the Vale had to send men like him and Andar and 100 others with horsebells muffled, to strike and scatter shapes that could be smoke or men but sometimes were both. He learned the bitter ford, where the stream ran like a wire over rock and horses hated it and men loved it for the ambush plain it offered if only the fog would come down. On one such day, deep in the turn of the year when the valleys brewed their own weather and the fog moved in sheets like ghosts, Jon killed a man for the first time who was not in a ring with blunted sword. The mountain rider came out of gray with a sound like a hawk's cry, a shock of hair pinned up with a bone pin, feathers stuck in it, and his eyes were darting and alive with a joy Jon could not understand. He swung a short iron hatchet hard as if he would split the fog. Jon met him head-on because there was no room to breath and less to think. The spear point he held found the hollow under the man's ribs as neatly as if the mountain had carved a place for it. The clan rider's cry changed into something else and then to nothing. Jon felt the weight drag at him as the horse stumbled and went to its knees and shook him loose. The wolf leapt ghost-white and tore the throat so the blood pulsed black into the fog. It was quiet, then. The world seemed surprised at itself. Andar's hand took Jon's shoulder, steadying. "Breathe," Andar said. "Breathe, boy. It's not your first. It's your first that looked at you." Jon could not say which was worse. By winter's heart the word was Rob King in the north and victories strung on the map like beads. And the vale seethed under Lisa's command that no man ride. Jon Royce went often to the Eyrie and came back with his temper cooled by mountain air and his humor sharpened by it in ways that did not make him pleasant. When the news came of Riverrun relieved and Jaime Lannister bound, men drank to Catelyn Tully for the first time in that hall in a decade. When the twins opened for Robb and closed behind him, the song changed. When a raven fluttered in with damp wings and a strip of parchment with red drops that had once been wax, and the letters told the tale of a crossbow and a blade and a hall full of bread and salt, Jon stood in the doorway, and if there were any tears in him, they would have froze on his face before they fell. He went out into the snow that afternoon without cloak or sense, Ghost padding behind him, and did not know where his feet were going until the cliff's lip stared him down. The sea gnashed white. He had a thought that he could step forward and go to his father and to Robb all at once and be done with the long ache that had moved into his ribs and made a home there. But Ghost pushed him, hard, a weight at his thigh, a head under his hand, and the white wolf made a sound so small and lost that Jon sank to one knee in the drift and put his forehead to Ghost's skull and let the old sea talk him back into his body. Rabar Royce put away his harp and did not take it out again that winter. Andar said little, and when he did it came out of him like pieces of stone. Bronze Jon sat with maps and wine and the kind of patience that is not really patience, however still it sits. "The veil will ride," he said once softly to no one, to the bronze runes at his wrist and the iron in his voice. "In its time, in its time. Time makes and unmakes men when they cannot make their world." Jon grew out of boyhood without noticing the moment it happened. His face thinned. The soft at his jaw went to bone. He fought better and thought ahead in fights instead of seeing them blow by blow. He learned a horse's mind and how to be its other thought. Ghost's eyes went into him like winter stars, patient and cruel and deeply loving. He wrote letters that he did not send, folding them and burning them, and none of them said what he wanted about the world and how one part of it could go red and the rest remain stubbornly as it had been. Then spring came dirty and late, and with it came Peter Baelish and a girl who was no one and wore a bastard's name. They came winding up the mountain like a secret with boots on. The mules loved the girl's hands at once, which told Jon one of the old truths about mules. They have better judgment than men. Elaine Stone, she was called, all soft hair and a steadiness in her that struck him to the heart because it had been Sansa's once, but now it was only worlds away, wearing another's dress. He knew her the way a man knows his house when the colors changed and the tapestries fell and new ones hung and there was a new smell put in the rushes. He knew her by the way her smile started small and could grow like dawn, and by the way her hands worried themselves when her back was kept straight by pride. He said nothing. Her eyes slid off him, frightened and stubborn by turns. Peter's eyes never left anything they wanted. Jon watched them both and watched the Eyrie change its breathing for them. Lisa went to pieces that would not fit together. The Eyrie's halls rang with her laughter and weeping at once. Sometimes she would be a hush and a hand smoothing hair and sometimes a shriek, and sometimes she would look at Jon as if he were a knife she had mislaid. Marillion the singer played and cringed and preened until Peter's lip looked almost kind when it curled. Ser Lothier Brune took orders as if he were asleep, and did not miss much. Jon saw the girl alone where the gallery turned out to a balcony. Ghost huffed at his heel. Snow came down lightly, thickening the air. Elaine Stone put her hand out and caught a flake upon the glove, as if it were a bird lit there. Jon went up beside her and did not scare it off. "You know me," she said, not quite like a question. He heard the north in her again and the taste of Winterfell's stones in his mouth. "Elaine Stone," he said, "bastard of some man with a coin and no courage." He drew a breath and left it be. "Will you feed my wolf?" She did, hand steady, Ghost's teeth delicate against kid leather. When she looked up, the snow had scissored two white lines across her lashes. "Are you angry?" she asked, and he knew she was not asking about Ghost at all. "I am a great many things," he said. The mountain wind stole his breath and returned it colder, enough to temper the shape of his words. "But there are mountains between us and anger. Would you climb them all if you could?" "I would," Until then, we will not be fools." "Lord Peter says the Lord's declarant are fools," she said carefully, trying the words as if they belonged to another and found they fit too easily. "He says they will break their own necks with their pride if he only lets them." "I trust mules more than lords," John said. "The mules have never lied to me." She laughed, surprised into it, and the sound made his throat so tight he wanted to put his hands around it. The night Lisa summoned Elaine to the high hall, the mountain had turned white and hard as iron. The castle rang with small sounds, peaceful ones. A cup set down, a door pulled quietly to, the soft thud of a mule's hoof down in the sheltered court where Maya had lodged them against the storm. John heard the summons and heard something in it. He went where the sound led. Ghost slunk like a strip of snow. The high hall is smaller than the name promises, and the moon door is worse than men say if you have not stood before it. The sky is a living thing there. The air is thin as an old man's laugh. Lisa stood framed in that blue. Her hair was tangled into a crown that had no king. Elaine stood before her, small and very straight, her gloves off, hands empty. John came to the arch and did not step into the light. Peter stood behind Lisa, his face a careful thing. Ser Lothier was a shadow, as he liked to be. Marillion hugged his harp like a man drowning clings to wood. John's hand found Ghost's scruff and the thick ruff of fur. There was an answer to a prayer no man had heard him say. Lisa's voice cracked and ran, up and down, the dam breaking after a long season. "My lord husband never loved me," she said to the world or to no one. "He wanted your sister. He always wanted your sister. He will not have her. He will not take what is mine." He had heard that tone once in a woman in the winter town, just after the midwife had told her the baby would not breathe. It did not belong in a high hall, but grief never asked permission. Elaine said soft things, Sansa things, and then Lisa put her hands upon the girl and the wind ate the cries. John stepped before he thought. He did not know afterward whether his feet made sound. Peter's hand had come to Lisa's elbow in a softness stranger and colder than the wind. "Lisa," Peter said. "Lisa, look at me. You will not." John put himself between Elaine and the blue. He felt the sky at his back like a second mouth, breathing. Ghost's teeth showed very white, and that was the first time Ser Lothier truly looked at John and saw him. Lisa's hands fluttered. They were fat little birds without nests. Peter's hands were knives offered as if they were garlands. The story had been told already in Peter's head. John could see it, its end written, only waiting for the body to follow. It ended as it ended. Lisa went out into the Vale's huge cold silence, her scream snatched away at once. Marillion wept and swallowed and wept, and Peter turned and made a tale, and Ser Lothier's eyes acknowledged that the tale was made. Later, in the small hall, with the hearth drinking logs and Maya somewhere warm with her mules and Ghost asleep with his head across John's boots, Peter put his hand upon John's shoulder in a friendly way. "You have a stout heart," he said. "I thought they had bred such things out of the north. It would be a pity to waste one with rashness." "Is that what you call looking?" John asked. His voice came out quiet and low. "I call it watching." Peter smiled without mockery, which made it worse. "You are young. Youth turns everything to swords. Remember, the Vale is not the north. Here we use other weapons. Come. There are men who will pretend to be your friends and enemies who will pretend to be men. If I say you will be safer at the Bloody Gate, will you hear my meaning?" "I hear all your meanings," John said. "I do not know that I like any of them." "Liking is for singers," Peter said. "Surviving is for lords." The lords declarant came with banners furled against the snow and their tempers half drawn out of their sheaths. Bronzeyon rode before them like a wall. Lady Anya Wainwood had her mouth set as if she were biting a nail. Horton Redfort's face had the color of cold iron. Gilwood Hunter was all quiet eyes. Simon Templeton all sharpened courtesy. Benedar Belmore all bones. Lynn Corbray came bright as a sin, Lady Forlorn on his thigh, and he grinned at Peter and hated him with a hatred they both enjoyed the taste of. John stood with the Royce men while Peter gave away a little of everything that was not his and won a great deal of what was. Nestor Royce got a title grander than the thing itself, the Knight of the Gate, and a slice of revenues from a castle that could feed 3 garrisons if he had had the men to put in it. He glowed like a coal in a winter hearth. Bronze Yon's mouth did not soften, but his eyes slid to John once, as if to say that even a fox needed somewhere to curl in winter. John returned him nothing but presents. He watched, he listened, he did not spit. He slept little as Peter played the veil like a painted board, setting pieces so precisely that men did not notice they had been set at all. He learned that Lynn Corbray could hate and take coin at once, and that Ser Lothier smiled rarely and not often for show, which made his loyalty a thing that mattered. He learned that Nestor, who looked so simple as to be blunt, had a second sharp hidden in his sleeve, and that Maya Stone's mules would follow her into a thunderhead and out again because she never lied to them, which is a thing more men should have learned from mules. He learned that Elaine Stone could balance steel on her tongue when she needed to, and he learned how much that cost her. It was a black night when the mountain clans came down in numbers uncommon for that season, using the storm like a cloak. The bloody gate was a knife in the mountainside. Its towers hunched against one another, and the wind through its merlins made a sound like song in a man's teeth. John had a bed there now and a post and a horse that minded him more than it minded most men. Ser Donnell Wainwood held command, old enough to have seen men grow and break, still moving with a patience belying bones that must ache in the cold. "They've counted our garrison," Ser Donnell said, bowing his grizzled head over a map that was not much better than a memory of the terrain. "If Bronze Yon had had his way, we'd have double, and they'd have counted wrong. As it is, they will try the Goat's Path and the streambed together. Which is to say, they will try everything," John said, letting his finger find the lines where he would go if he were an enemy who hated walls. "We cannot meet them everywhere. Nous, Sir Donnell agrede. But we can make them believe we have. They are proud. Pride is a simple horse to ride." It was a long night of very short pieces of time. Snow makes a man hear differently. Sound turns itself strange in it. Men stumbled out of white to die with their mouths open. The alarm bell thudded and went still and thudded again, and its voice was the only thing keeping the human shape upon things. John sent 10 men where the path cut under the outcrop. That was a guess that turned true. He kept 3 back where any man would have wanted to lead them forward. He let 1 ladder set to see who would climb it and how, his eyes counting the badges stenciled in mud on fur. He saw a face and did not know if it belonged to a man he had killed near the Bitterford, a boy now grown, or a stranger made from the same pieces of hunger. He went out himself when it was nearly morning because there was no one else to send and the pines were catching and would burn the gate if left to take their time. He went with Ghost at his thigh because there was no other way to go that did not make him half a man. The fire's red made the snow into another thing. He could not breathe properly for the smoke. He cut 3 men and slipped once, and 1 spear caught his mail and bruised him so badly he would feel it when the snows had turned to old snow. The last one came like a shadow, and Ghost tore his hamstring and he went down into the burning pine with a scream that went up blue. They put it out with wet hides and patience. Dawn found the stones black and bright, the snow dirty with the story of the night. Ser Donnell came to John where he knelt with his back against the gate and breathed like a bellows and did not know if he wanted to vomit or sleep. "I will call you Ser," Ser Donnell said. John looked up through the hair stuck into his eyes and could not bring pride to his face. It was too heavy. "I am a bastard," he said, because it was always the thing to say when someone offered you anything. "A knight is a man who is what he has done," Ser Donnell said. "If all we were what our fathers wrote down in their books, the world would have ended in a pleasant song long ago. Rise then. It will be Ser, if I must go to the 7 and draw the word from their mouths." Bronze Yon made it formal later, when the Lord's declarant needed a sign not from Peter. He laid his old bronze-sheathed blade upon John's shoulders and said words that were older than the veil and newer than the boy who had once stood in Winterfell's Godswood and asked if this was for his mother's name. "We have need of men who will not lie to us," he said, and his mouth quirked as if lying was a habit that men took up like pipe smoking. "We give the gate into your keeping, Ser Jon Snow, until the spring is a spring and not a mockery, and the lady sees fit to give us leave to be men again. John wore the white wolf's head on his cloak then, not for house but for himself, and discovered men followed it when he turned and lifted his hand in more ways than one. They rode out twice that month to break small bands that had no right to be as dangerous as they were. They took 3 mules stolen from Maya's string, and Maya kissed John on the cheek after, and called him a name in the Vale tongue that he thought might mean stubborn stone. Ghost learned the smell of a sparking fuse in pine resin and took to circling wood carts as if guarding them. Elaine came down to the gates of the moon with Peter when the snows set hard into crust, and they lived there as if a freedom had been found. Peter's eyes ticked like a man's fingers upon an abacus, toting. John avoided him when he could, and when he could not, he said little and gave him nothing that had edges. He walked the ramparts with Elaine sometimes, not as a lord and his sister, not as anything but 2 people with their bodies making warmth against a wind that had no interest in their old names. "Littlefinger will marry you to Harry the heir," John said once bluntly, because the veil made him plain when he could be. "He will set a stone in each palm and call them a choice. He will say both stones are white. He will save the North," she said, and he could hear the fear in it like a thin wire strung very tight. "Peter Baelish will save Peter Baelish," John said. He watched a hawk tilt and flash far over the slope. "Sometimes that will help other men. Sometimes it will cut them where they do not expect to bleed." "What will you do?" Elaine asked, turning her face to him so her hair blew across it and she did not brush it back. "I will hold a gate," he said. "That is all I have. When the day comes I will open it, if the man at my door is one I can call Lord without my mouth filling with ashes. If we open them to the wrong man, we will not close them again." She looked at him the way girls sometimes look at a boy before she knows if he is a boy or a man. "When I was small," she said, "I used to dream the snow would be sugar and that I might taste it and it would sweeten me. Then I grew and learned that snow is only snow and it makes your fingers ache and your lips crack if you lick it. It can also keep meat," John said. He could not think of anything else to say that was not a promise he could not make. The North sent rumors the way a fire sends smoke. Stannis at the wall. Stannis at the Dreadfort. Stannis in the woods lost like a boy. Bolton in Winterfell with a bride who might be Arya, who was not Arya. John listened and kept his face. He did not know why his heart beat so when he heard Stannis' name or why the Vale wind seemed to smell of deep fir forests for a breath. He dreamed of a heart tree that was not here and a man with a crow on one shoulder with eyes as white as ghosts. He dreamed of a blue cold that spoke without a mouth and of swords shattering like sugar. He woke with Ghost's teeth at his sleeve, tugging, and went to the wall to find the dawn crawling up the peaks. He put his hands upon old stone and made himself promise a thing he could not know how to keep. If the North cried, he would hear it. Peter threw a feast that spring for the lords who wanted roses and got turnips. John went because he had to go, and because Elaine would be there, and because sometimes it is safer to be seen where knives are being thrown than to be absent and imagined a better target. Bronze Yone came in mail and old bronze, and Lady Anya came in a gown that had been her grandmother's, and she bowed with the grace of an older tale before she set her mouth like iron again. Lynn Corbray glittered. Nestor Royce smiled as if he had been given a toy and was thinking how to use it to pry open a coffer. Horton Redfort's cheeks were chapped and Florentine with cold. The wine was spiced and the bread good. Peter talked of gulls and of coin and of summer sailings to Pentos, of which gulls knew nothing and coin everything. He told them the Eyrie would open when the passes were clear, and when a man asked when that would be he smiled and said, "When the 7 make a road for us," and they laughed, some with teeth and some without. He gave Nestor a clasp for his cloak with tiny sapphires that looked like eyes when you caught them out of the corner of yours. He kissed Elaine's cheek with a father's chasteness and the hunger of a man who slept with hunger in him and liked it. After, in the corridor that led toward the stairs that fed the gate's crowning tower, Lynn Corbray came upon John as if by accident. They walked together a while, nothing between them but cold. Lynn's beauty had the quality of something polished with hands and malice. "You move like a man who expects something to spring at him," he said with amusement. "I have had that happen," John said. He made himself think of spear drills and not of how easily Lyn could draw Lady Forlorn and test him. "You are Stark's get," Lyn said. "You have his stillness and not his good luck. He died with fewer enemies than I now have, and see where it brought him. It brought him to a place where men still say his name without spitting," Jon said. Lyn's laugh chimed like ice falling down a well. "Foolishness is very grand on the lips of the young," Lyn said. He drifted away, light as a leaf fallen into a courtyard and taken up again by a servant. Jon stood a long time, letting the mountain breathe through him. When he went back to the hall, Bronze Yon beckoned him with a tilt of his head to the place where maesters and clever men are shoved at feasts, out of the way of song. "You are being sized by more than one tailor," Yon said in his blunt way. "Do not let any of them cut your cloth." "Am I your cloth?" Jon asked, half smiling despite everything. "You are mine," Yon said. "When the gate is under your hand, when it stands, I will say it was your standing. That is how I keep my own cloth uncut." Jon slept after in an unpleasant truce with his bed. In his dreams he was climbing again with Maya on a path that was only wind, and the mountain turned under him too slowly to see but too fast to keep his footing, and someone cried below in a voice like Arya's. Ghost woke him with a growl so low and sharp that it seemed to come from the stone itself. The wolf was on his feet, hackles a ridge, teeth a pale half-moon meant to be shown. Jon reached for the sword beside his bed because there are moments when a sword is all a man has, and his hand found the hilt even as the door sighed. The man who came in had no light. He had a smell of stale oil and fierce sweat, and the blade in his hand made the blacker sort of black in the air. He thought Jon was sleeping and discovered his mistake in a white flash as Ghost struck his side and Jon's sword rang with a note that woke the watch. It was quick and bad, the way a dogfight is quick and bad. The man was good enough to have been paid. He was not good enough to be there. When it was done, Ghost's ear bled and Jon's shoulder had a cut that would lay a scar down it like a crooked line of snow. The dead man's mouth sagged open and learned nothing. Ser Donnell took one look and sent boys running in different directions. Nestor came, and with him Peter, and with Peter Lothier Brune, his eyes flat. Peter's face was very nearly grief. He had the gift of faces. "This is an ugly thing," he said, and someone else might have believed him. "Our enemies multiply. We must be friends." "Then, Ser Jon, mustn't we?" "We must hold the gate," Jon said. He did not say, "And you will stop sending knives with feet up the stairs in the night, if you wish the gate held for you and not against you." He did not say, "You have taught me your weapons. I like mine better." He wrote to no one, and he wrote to everyone in his head. He wrote to a father he would not see, and to a brother a world in the ground, and to a girl who wore her own face under another name. He held a gate. He trained boys whose beards came in patchy and quick, and he said their names over their bodies when they did not come back because the mountain knows its own, even when it takes them. He sent men with Bronze Yon to break an encampment that had grown too bold. He turned away a merchant whose wagons had more iron than cheese. He learned the look of a sky that meant avalanches and remembered Maya's voice saying, "Trust the mules, Snowboy." So he did, and it kept half a column alive to curse him and drink with him afterward. He went up to the Eyrie once in that season when the snows turned glassy on the upper paths and each step bit through only by the grace of iron ice nails, because Elaine had sent him a note with a hand that had tried to be calm. She was not calm when he found her on the little gallery where the wind cuts crosswise through two halls. She had grown thinner and the bones of her wrists looked fine as birds against the glove. "He will do it," she said without preface. "He will give me to Harry. He says it will mend the veil. He says we will come down like a falcon upon a hare, and the hare will be the north and it will not know it is being saved." "What do you want?" Jon asked. He dared the question though it had teeth. "I want Winterfell," she said, small and fierce, and the single tear that broke from her eye rolled into her hairline and was lost in the wind's cold fingers. "I want it not like a jewel, to hold up to a mirror for its sparkle. I want it like I want the feeling of my feet on the stones of the bridge, and the way the gods would smells. I want it like you want it." He reached and did not touch her. There are vows a man makes to himself that are harder than any god's hearing. We will find a gate, he said. Between snakes and storms and men's hunger, there is always a gate. If I must hold it alone, I will hold it. She laughed at that, a soft surprised sound at the idea of a man holding a whole world's gate. A hawk cut the blue above them, a dark scythe. We will have need of men, she said, echoing Bronze Yone without knowing it. Men who will not lie to us. Then we will make them, John said. Or we will be them, and the rest will learn. Summer came like a memory, and the passes opened grudgingly. And Peter declared a tourney to make the Vale forget its own long hunger. Harry Harding came with Lady Anya's men, young and gilded and not yet sure how to stand in the world he would inherit. He looked at Elaine with a boy's cruelty because that is the first thing boys learn to do with women when they are afraid of them. John saw how Elaine swallowed it and turned it into something the boy could not digest. Harry came to the bloody gate with his feathered cloak and his friends and their easy laughter and asked John questions that made clear he did not hear answers well. You are the wolf bastard then, he said, and his mouth smiled in a way that thought itself likable. I am a knight of the Vale, John said. He opened the gate for them and closed it after carefully, the old stones grateful under his hand. And you are a boy who will be a lord. I hope your change is clean. Harry flushed and used to being measured. You are presumptuous, he said, then colored more when his companions were slow to echo him. Still, men say you fought at the gate in the winter. Men say a great many things, John said. He glanced at the sky. The mountain says very little. Listen to it. Harry frowned up at the rock face and saw nothing but rock. He rode in, puzzled and miffed, and his cloak fluttered behind him like a bird that had not yet learned to fly. Midsummer brought rumors thicker and more conflicting than the flies in the stables. The north was a riddle with blades for answers. Stannis had vanished, Stannis had triumphed, Bolton had married a girl who was not Arya, Theon Greyjoy had been a ghost turned flayed flesh and now was a ghost again. John sent what ravens he could to men he trusted to answer plain and got back only silence or words wrapped around other words like skin. He had one letter that he read twice and burned and wished he had not, signed only with a hand that had once written to him of archery scores and of Rob's temper when it ran hot and then cold. It had said, "We are not all dead and we are not all yours," and the ink had blotted where the hand had shook. When the first white came that autumn it came early, and men said this would be the winter that would break the way the old men had told it would. John stood on the curtain walk with Ghost beside him that first morning and watched the snow write its soft doctrine across stone. Elaine came up with a cloak too thin for the weather and John put his own upon her shoulders without asking. She made a small sound, not from the cold, and pulled it around herself like a vow. Winters were never what the old men said, John said, smiling because sometimes you must smile like a man at his own funeral. They have to say things larger than themselves or the boys won't listen. I hear you, she said. My father used to say, John began, and then stopped because he did not know whether he could. He tried, and the words came like water breaking around a rock. He used to say that the snow is not an enemy. It is only the thing that is in the way, and the way changes because of it. That is all a winter is, a way that has changed. Men who will not change their way die in it. And men who change too easily? She asked, and did not say Peter. They are not men, John said softly. They are reeds. The first flood that wants them has them. She looked down the white line of the road that curved toward the gate and narrowed with distance until it was only an idea. They will ride, she said, and he did not have to ask who they were. They have promised me. They will, he said, but he did not say when, because he had learned not to promise men's hearts when he did not own them. He did what he could own. He set drills and set watches, moved barley into storerooms whose floors had been swept too many times and discovered cracks like old lies underneath. He walked the same circuit so often he could do it with his ears and nose when fog came down like white wool. He went into the mountains with Maya once, against his own best counsel, because a caravan had not made a way castle and the men in it would be bones if someone did not turn them right. They found the cart stalled where two boulders shaped like sisters crowded the path. The men had built a little wall of flight out of things to hide behind. A chest, a chair, a sack of something that had leaked grain into the snow in a pattern that made a bird's tracks. They brought two out alive, and the fact counted more than the three they had not, which was a truth John could not put his teeth in without shivering. He returned one night with fog in his hair and Maya singing something bawdy about a mule and a lord, and found Bronze Yon waiting in the tower room with a fire whose smoke went unwillingly up the flue. "A raven?" Yon said without flourish or false comfort, and handed John a strip of words that shook at the edges in his hand because his hand was shaking. It bore no seal for fear of the wrong eyes. The hand was the one that had blotted, newly steadier. Said only, "The North is not dead. It remembers." John stood a long time with the words in him like a coal, not warming, but making his skin think of warmth. The mountain shifted at his back as if settling its old bones. Ghost lay his head upon John's foot and made a sound like a sigh shaped into a wolf. "The veil will ride," Bronze Yon said again, for the 1000th time, and this time the words felt not like promise but like a thing that had already begun to happen somewhere in the very old metal of the world. "When the gate opens," John said, "we will not close it again." "When it opens," Yon agreed. They stood together in Old Stone while snow ticked at the arrow loops and the long road ran white and the girl called Elaine slept somewhere under John's cloak and under another name. And in the north a heart tree opened red eyes into winter and watched, and the wolf lifted his head and listened for a cry from very far away.